The news of the past 7 days or so, even less than that, of course, was the decommitment of 4-star, elite, modern-day defensive lineman, Trinity League MVP, Tomuhini Topui from the Oregon Ducks right now. Now, I want to say one thing to really kick this thing off, and we can't sugarcoat it. This decommitment sucks. It does. Like, there's a reason why USC was pushing as hard as they were for a guy like Tom. There's a reason why there are other schools more involved now in this recruitment for someone like Tom, because he is an elite player. When you combine his size with his speed and agility, playing at an elite school like Mater Dei, he's got the whole package that's going to interest high-level college football programs out there. Like, this is not the time, after something like this and the decommitments that have been happening surrounding this Oregon football program, this is not the time to go out and say, well, hey, Oregon's going to beat USC by 20 or 30 in November anyway. Hey, it certainly might happen. This is not the time to go out there and say, well, USC is going to go 7-5 anyway, so what does it matter? Oregon is an alpha program. Oregon is focused on Oregon, and Oregon is playing the long game in this recruitment. This recruitment, ladies and gentlemen, is not over. When all is said and done, Tomuhini Topui is probably going to end up in Eugene, Oregon again. Like, if you listen to, for example, the Ducks Dish, shout out to J-Hop and Max over there, part of the On3 network over there at Scoop Duck. Like, I've been listening to them, and they've been saying that there's been some smoke behind this as far as USC making a move on Tomuhini Topui. And if that information was out there, of course, the coaching staff knew that this was a possibility or maybe was even going to happen. So considering that, you have to trust in Dan, you have to trust in Marshall that they have a plan in place. And if Tom is as much of a priority as I tend to believe that he is for a school like Oregon, this staff is going to have a plan. This staff, and I'm going to say this is going to sound like a broken record, this staff is not focused on March. This staff is not focused on April. This staff is focused on December. This staff is focused on signing day. This staff is focused on finishing strong. And, you know, there may be some, and I understand where there might be some people in the fan base that might be a little bit down right now considering the decommitment of Jonas Williams, the decommitment of Bat Malatalo, and now the decommitment of Tomuhini Topui. But we have zero proof that Dan and this staff will not finish strong, because that is all they have done over the past few seasons on the recruiting trail. Back-to-back top 5 classes at the University of Oregon. They have finished better than anybody on the recruiting trail. And there is still a lot out there for the Oregon Ducks, certainly right now. Like, this is a program that is still in play for Jackson Cantwell, Emmanuel Iannacho, Brandon Harrington, Jared Curtis, or Ryder Lyons, a flip for Chris Henry Jr., Devon Benjamin, Jet Washington. All of those guys that I just mentioned are all top 50 players in the United States of America right now. And then when you look at the commitments right now at USC and at Oregon, the Trojans have 16 commits right now. The Ducks have 8. Oregon is a program that is notorious for not having very many commitments at this time of year. Oregon will really start to kick things into gear when they get more spring practices, thus they get more kids on campus, and then as we get into the summer, and definitely when we get into the fall with some of these on-campus visits when there's games at Autzen Stadium, and then finishing things off certainly in December on signing day as well. One last thing that I want to talk about as it pertains to maybe this discussion right now is the state of California. Like, you cannot deny that USC is clearly kicking things to gear locally within the state of California. And that has to be the recruiting plan for the Cardinal and Gold right now, is to reclaim their state and try to do as well, specifically in Southern California with the elite talent there, as humanly possible for the Trojans. But the thing about Oregon, that even if USC really continues this and they do indeed get guys to sign on the dotted line, like in the future, that is not all of a sudden this death blow to the Oregon Ducks and their ability to bring in elite talent. Like, the state of California is a very important and a very big part to the Oregon recruiting plan. But I don't think it's a big enough part of their recruiting plan as it is a bigger part to the USC recruiting plan right now. Like, look what happened when USC went out and looked for elite talent in the southeast part of America, those 2 5-star defensive tackles. They committed to USC, but they decommitted shortly thereafter. You look at the last 2 classes for the Oregon Ducks. First, the 24 cycle. Now, there were a decent amount of players from California in that class for Oregon, but the top 5 commitments in that cycle were outside of the state of California. This last class in 2025 that was just signed in December had their top 9 players were signed from outside of the state of California. Oregon is creating more pipelines than to just schools like Mater Dei or to a specific area locally like Southern California. Oregon and Dan Lanning has really his hands in it, has made a lot of connections in a lot of different areas across America. Look at what Rashad Samples is doing within his connections within the state of Texas right now. Of course, Decorian Moore, Tredarian Ball in this class, and there's certainly more where that came from. Like, they're going out to Maryland and getting some really good defensive backs. Evie Obadegwu, and I think it was Brandon Finney in this last class, was from the state of Maryland as well. Like, they're going to the east, they're going to the middle of America, they're going to the south. Like, Oregon has proved to be a national recruiting program. And even if USC is winning more battles in the Southern California, like one Tomuhini Topui, Oregon is still going to be able to bring in top 5 talent because they have maybe a broader national recruiting footprint than maybe USC does. But both schools, assuming that this trend continues the way it's going, they're both going to be great recruiting programs. And at the end of the day, it's up to development. And regardless of maybe what some other people want to tell you, Oregon, under Dan Lanning, has done a pretty good job in terms of development.